I need everyone watching this to understand exactly how insane what just happened on Raw truly is, because if you blinked, if you looked away for even a second, you missed the moment that's going to change the entire landscape of WWE for the next year at minimum. Paul Heyman, the special counsel, the advocate, the wise man, the manipulator who has betrayed literally everyone he's ever worked with in his entire career, just officially joined Team CM Punk on Monday Night Raw. And here's the part that should make your blood absolutely boil. CM Punk accepted him with open arms, smiled and shook his hand, welcomed him into the fold like they're old friends reuniting rather than former partners who had one of the most toxic professional relationships in modern wrestling history. Are you kidding me right now? This is the same Paul Heyman who manipulated Punk during his championship reign, who whispered poison in his ear, who contributed directly to the circumstances that drove Punk out of WWE for nearly a decade. This is the same CM Punk who has spent years talking about loyalty and integrity and standing on principle, and now he's aligning himself with the most disloyal, unprincipled person in the entire wrestling industry. If this doesn't make you want to absolutely explode in the comments about what a massive mistake Punk is making, if this doesn't have you questioning everything you thought you knew about these characters, then you're not paying attention to the magnitude of what just went down. Smash that like button if you think Punk is being an absolute fool. Drop a comment telling me how long you think it takes before Heyman betrays him again, and make sure you subscribe because this partnership is going to be an absolute train wreck and you need to be here for every moment when it inevitably falls apart. Let me paint the complete picture of why this is such an unbelievable and controversial development, because the history between Paul Heyman and CM Punk is complicated, toxic, and filled with betrayal that should make this alliance impossible. We're going back to the early 2000s when Punk was making his name in independent wrestling, working for companies like Ring of Honor where Paul Heyman would occasionally appear as a talent scout for WWE. Heyman recognized Punk's potential early, saw that he had something special in terms of charisma, in-ring ability, and the capacity to connect with audiences in authentic ways that most wrestlers never achieve. When Punk eventually made his way to WWE's ECW brand, it was Heyman who was running that show as the on-screen authority figure, and there was immediately a connection between them based on mutual respect for each other's minds and approaches to the wrestling business. That initial relationship was productive and helped establish Punk as someone to watch in WWE's developmental system. But the real partnership, the one that everyone remembers and that makes this current reunion so shocking, happened years later during Punk's legendary championship reign from 2011 to 2014. After Punk delivered his famous pipe bomb promo that changed WWE forever, after he won the WWE Championship and held it for 434 days, after he became the undeniable top guy in the company whether management wanted to acknowledge it or not, Paul Heyman inserted himself into Punk's orbit as a strategic advisor and on-screen associate. The pairing made sense on paper because both men were intelligent, both understood the business at a deeper level than most wrestlers, and both had reputations as guys who said what they thought regardless of corporate pressure to stay on script. But the Heyman and Punk partnership was never the smooth collaboration it appeared to be on television. Behind the scenes, according to multiple reports that came out after Punk left WWE, there was constant tension about creative direction, about who was really in charge of Punk's character, about whether Heyman was helping Punk or using him as a vehicle for his own relevance. Heyman has always been someone who needs to be at the center of attention, who can't just be someone's manager without making it at least partly about himself. With Punk, who also has a massive ego and strong opinions about how his character should be presented, that created inevitable conflict. They made great television together, but the relationship was built on a foundation of mutual manipulation where each was trying to use the other to advance their own agenda. The breaking point came during Punk's final months with WWE when everything started falling apart. Punk was physically broken down from years of working through injuries, he was mentally exhausted from battling with creative and management about his positioning, and he was dealing with personal issues including a serious staph infection that WWE's medical staff allegedly misdiagnosed and mistreated. During this period, Heyman was nowhere to be found supporting Punk. Instead, Heyman was already transitioning to his next meal ticket, positioning himself to become Brock Lesnar's advocate full-time. When Punk walked out of WWE in January 2014, burnt out and feeling completely unsupported by the company and the people he thought had his back, Heyman was one of the names Punk mentioned in subsequent interviews as someone who disappointed him, someone who he thought would have been more loyal given their supposed friendship and partnership. Fast forward through Punk's nearly 10-year absence from WWE, through his disastrous mixed martial arts career in UFC, through his work in independent wrestling and with AEW that ended in controversy and lawsuits, through all the years of fans chanting his name and begging for his return. When Punk finally came back to WWE in 2023, it was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to do things right this time, to build the legacy he always wanted without the politics and drama that plagued his first run. And for months, Punk has been adamant about surrounding himself with people he can trust, about building Team CM Punk with loyal allies who share his vision and won't stab him in the back the moment it's convenient. He's talked in promos about learning from his past mistakes, about being smarter in his second act, about not letting snakes into his inner circle. Every single one of those statements is now revealed as complete nonsense because he just welcomed the biggest snake in WWE history with open arms. Now let's talk about what actually happened on Raw that led to this shocking and frankly idiotic alliance. The show had been building throughout the night with various segments showing Team CM Punk backstage, discussing strategy for their ongoing war with their various enemies on the Raw roster. Punk has assembled a solid group of allies including some talented younger wrestlers who respect his legacy and see value in aligning with him, plus some veterans who have their own reasons for joining his cause. The team has been effective, but there's been an underlying sense that they're missing something, that they need an edge to truly dominate the way Punk envisions. That's the setup that WWE Creative established to try to justify what was about to happen, although whether that justification actually makes sense is extremely debatable. Paul Heyman appeared early in the show in a segment with Raw General Manager Adam Pearce, discussing his status and future with WWE. For weeks since his brutal split with Brock Lesnar, Heyman has been in this limbo state where he's not actively managing anyone, not involved in major storylines, basically just appearing occasionally to cut promos about being a free agent looking for his next great client. Heyman has teased aligning with various wrestlers, has been courted by different factions, but has maintained that he's being selective about his next move because his reputation and legacy are at stake. In the segment with Pearce, Heyman made cryptic comments about having made a decision, about being ready to reveal his next partnership, about how the wrestling world was about to witness the formation of the most dangerous alliance in WWE history. Later in the show, CM Punk was in the ring cutting a promo about Team CM Punk's goals and their challenges going forward. He talked about needing every advantage, about surrounding himself with the best minds in the business, about being willing to make uncomfortable decisions if those decisions lead to victory. The crowd was hot for Punk as always, feeding off his energy and his authenticity. And then Paul Heyman's music hit, and the entire arena went silent in confusion and shock. Punk's facial expression showed genuine surprise, though whether that was real or performed is anyone's guess given that both men are exceptional actors. Heyman walked out slowly, deliberately, soaking in the moment and the crowd's reaction. What happened next was masterclass manipulation from Paul Heyman, and the fact that CM Punk fell for it or chose to go along with it is what makes this so infuriating. Heyman got in the ring and launched into one of his signature promos, acknowledging the complicated history between himself and Punk, admitting that he made mistakes in their previous partnership, expressing what seemed like genuine remorse for not being there when Punk needed support during his first WWE run. Heyman talked about watching Punk's return from the outside, about seeing him build Team CM Punk and recognizing that this was Punk's moment to finally achieve everything he deserves. And then Heyman made his pitch. He doesn't want to manage Punk, doesn't want to be the advocate who stands in front and does all the talking. He wants to be the special counsel who works behind the scenes providing strategy and intelligence and all the knowledge he's accumulated over 40 years in the wrestling business. The pitch was brilliant in its design because it addressed every concern Punk might have about working with Heyman again. By positioning himself as behind the scenes rather than front and center, Heyman was essentially promising not to steal Punk's spotlight. By acknowledging past mistakes and expressing remorse, he was manipulating Punk's ego and his desire to believe that people can change and grow. By emphasizing the strategic value he brings rather than the promotional value, Heyman was appealing to Punk's pragmatic side that understands winning is what matters most. And Punk, either because he actually believes Heyman has changed or because he's so focused on winning that he's willing to overlook the obvious danger, accepted the offer right there in the ring. They shook hands, they hugged, and just like that, Team CM Punk had a new member who was almost certainly going to destroy them from within. The immediate reaction from the live crowd was mixed and confused, which perfectly mirrors the broader fan reaction across social media. Some people popped huge for the moment because Heyman and Punk together historically makes great television, and there's nostalgia for their previous partnership even though it ended badly. These fans are choosing to focus on the entertainment value and the storyline possibilities rather than the logical character issues with this alliance. They're excited to see what Heyman can add to Team CM Punk, how his presence changes the dynamic, what kind of promos and segments these two can create together. They're willing to suspend disbelief and just enjoy the ride without overthinking whether this makes sense for Punk's character. But there's a much larger and much angrier segment of the fanbase that sees this as a complete betrayal of everything CM Punk has claimed to stand for since returning to WWE. These fans are pointing out the obvious contradiction between Punk's rhetoric about loyalty and surrounding himself with trustworthy people and his decision to bring in Paul Heyman, who has literally never remained loyal to anyone in his entire career. They're frustrated that WWE is asking them to forget or ignore history, to pretend that the toxic ending to the Heyman-Punk partnership never happened or doesn't matter anymore. They're concerned that this alliance makes Punk look either stupid for trusting Heyman or hypocritical for abandoning his principles the moment he thinks it gives him an advantage. The anger is real and justified because this development undermines months of character work establishing Punk as someone who learned from his past and was determined not to repeat the same mistakes. Let's examine Paul Heyman's track record of loyalty because it's important to understand exactly who CM Punk just welcomed into his inner circle. Paul Heyman's entire career has been built on attaching himself to successful wrestlers, riding that success as long as it benefits him, then jumping ship to the next opportunity the moment his current situation becomes less advantageous. In the original ECW, Heyman used wrestlers mercilessly, paying them late or not at all, promising them opportunities that never materialized, all while building his own reputation as a creative genius. When ECW collapsed, Heyman immediately went to WWE and started over with new clients. He's managed or advocated for dozens of wrestlers over the years, including Brock Lesnar, Big Show, Kurt Angle, CM Punk previously, and many others. In literally every single case except his relationship with Lesnar, which only lasted as long as it did because Lesnar had all the power, Heyman eventually turned on his client or abandoned them for someone more useful to his ambitions. The Brock Lesnar partnership was the longest and most successful of Heyman's career, lasting over a decade and including multiple world championship reigns and some of the most memorable moments in WWE history. But even that relationship ended with Heyman being brutally F5'd by Lesnar when their interests finally diverged. Heyman was lucky to survive that split with his career intact, and the fact that he immediately started looking for his next meal ticket rather than taking time to reflect or change his approach tells you everything you need to know about who he is fundamentally. Paul Heyman is a survivor, an opportunist, someone who will say and do whatever is necessary to attach himself to power and relevance. Those qualities make him valuable as a strategic mind, but they also make him completely untrustworthy as an ally or partner. The strategic value Heyman brings to Team CM Punk is undeniable, which is probably what Punk is telling himself to justify this decision. Heyman has forgotten more about wrestling psychology, crowd manipulation, and long-term booking than most people in the business will ever know. He understands how to build heat, how to create compelling narratives, how to position his clients for maximum success. His mind for the business is genuinely elite level, and having access to that knowledge and experience could theoretically give Team CM Punk advantages they wouldn't have otherwise. Heyman knows everyone in the WWE locker room, knows their strengths and weaknesses, knows how to exploit opponents psychologically before they ever step in the ring. If Punk can actually keep Heyman loyal and prevent him from manipulating the situation for his own benefit, then this could be a genius move that elevates Team CM Punk to unstoppable status. But that's a massive if, and the entire premise requires believing that Paul Heyman has fundamentally changed his nature after 40 years of being exactly the same person. People don't change their core character that dramatically, especially not someone like Heyman whose entire identity is built around being the smartest guy in the room who can manipulate anyone into doing what he wants. The far more likely scenario is that Heyman has already planned his eventual betrayal of Punk, that he's joining Team CM Punk specifically to gain access to information and influence that he can leverage later, that this entire partnership is a setup for whatever Heyman's real agenda actually is. Maybe Heyman is secretly working for one of Team CM Punk's enemies. Maybe he's planning to recruit members of the team away from Punk to form his own faction. Maybe he just sees this as an opportunity to get back on television in a prominent role and will ride that opportunity as long as it lasts before moving on to his next scheme. The other members of Team CM Punk reportedly have mixed feelings about Heyman joining their group, which creates interesting internal dynamics that WWE will hopefully explore rather than ignore. Some team members are apparently excited about having Heyman's strategic mind available to help with their matches and storylines. They see him as a legend in the business whose knowledge can help them elevate their own careers. But other team members are suspicious and concerned, recognizing that Heyman's presence could be divisive and could give him opportunities to manipulate the team from within. There's also the ego factor where having someone like Heyman around takes attention and focus away from the other team members and puts it on him and his relationship with Punk. These internal tensions should create compelling television as they develop, assuming WWE creative actually follows through on those story threads. The immediate booking implications of Heyman joining Team CM Punk are significant for the entire Raw roster. Team CM Punk was already a formidable force, but with Heyman's intelligence backing them up, they become exponentially more dangerous in terms of the storylines they can be involved in. Opponents now have to worry not just about Punk and his allies' physical abilities, but also about being out-strategized and outmaneuvered by Heyman's scheming. This could lead to really interesting chess match storytelling where matches are won and lost based on preparation and tactics as much as in-ring ability. It also positions Heyman as a potential weakness that opponents can target, trying to separate him from the team or turn him against Punk before his inevitable betrayal happens organically. There's fascinating meta-commentary happening here about CM Punk's character and his growth or lack thereof. When Punk left WWE in 2014, one of the major themes of his departure was that he'd become disillusioned with the political games and the manipulation and the feeling that he couldn't trust anyone in WWE management or locker room. He spent years outside the company building a reputation as someone who valued authenticity and straight talk over political maneuvering. His entire return has been positioned as him being older and wiser, having perspective on what really matters, being more mature in his approach to the business. And yet here he is making the exact same mistake he made a decade ago by trusting Paul Heyman, which suggests either Punk hasn't actually grown at all or that he's so driven by the desire to win that he's willing to compromise every principle he claims to have. The alternative interpretation, and the one that's actually more interesting from a storytelling perspective, is that CM Punk knows exactly what he's doing and is fully aware that Heyman will eventually betray him. Maybe Punk is using Heyman just as much as Heyman thinks he's using Punk. Maybe Punk's plan is to extract every bit of value from Heyman's knowledge and strategic mind, ride that advantage as long as possible, and then cut Heyman loose before the inevitable betrayal can happen. That would make Punk a much more complex and morally gray character than the straightforward hero he's usually presented as. It would show that he's learned from his past not by avoiding manipulators like Heyman, but by becoming enough of a manipulator himself that he can play their game and win. That's a darker and more compelling character arc, and if WWE is actually going there rather than just doing a straightforward Heyman betrayal angle, then this could end up being brilliant long-term storytelling. The promos and segments that Paul Heyman and CM Punk are going to produce together will unquestionably be appointment television because both men are elite-level talkers who understand crowd psychology and how to build emotional investment. Their verbal exchanges during their previous partnership were consistently some of the best content on WWE television, and there's no reason to think this reunion will be any different in terms of pure entertainment value. Heyman's verbose, intelligent promos paired with Punk's more direct, passionate delivery creates a nice contrast that makes their segments dynamic and engaging. The question is whether great promos are enough to overcome the logical problems with this alliance, or whether fans will eventually tune out because they can't invest in a partnership that makes no sense for the characters involved. The wrestling media and journalist community has been absolutely buzzing about this development with takes ranging from excitement about the storytelling possibilities to cynicism about WWE falling back on old partnerships rather than creating new stars and new dynamics. Some journalists are giving WWE credit for taking a swing and trying something that will generate discussion and attention. Others are criticizing the company for being creatively bankrupt and just recycling past relationships because they're easier to book than developing fresh content. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, as it usually is with WWE creative decisions. This partnership between Heyman and Punk has potential to be either great or terrible depending entirely on execution and follow-through over the coming months. The business implications are also worth considering because Paul Heyman is genuinely a draw who moves needles in terms of ratings and social media engagement. His segments consistently perform well in viewership metrics, and having him back in a prominent role on Raw will likely boost that show's overall performance. WWE is clearly betting that the combination of Heyman and Punk together will create must-see television that keeps viewers tuning in week after week to see how this partnership develops and when it inevitably falls apart. From a pure business standpoint, this is probably a smart move regardless of the creative logic issues, because it generates buzz and attention and controversy, all of which translate to eyeballs on the product. So where does this all lead? That's the million-dollar question that nobody including probably WWE creative has a complete answer to yet. The obvious trajectory is that Paul Heyman helps Team CM Punk dominate for a few months, proves invaluable with his strategic guidance, slowly starts causing internal friction within the team through his manipulations, and eventually betrays Punk in spectacular fashion at a major premium live event setting up a big angle for WrestleMania season or SummerSlam. That's the paint-by-numbers version of this story and it's what most fans are expecting because it's what always happens with Paul Heyman. The more interesting and less predictable version would involve subverting those expectations somehow, either by having Heyman actually remain loyal for once or by having Punk betray Heyman first or by introducing a third-party complication that changes the entire dynamic. What's undeniable is that this partnership is going to dominate Raw storylines for the foreseeable future and probably become one of the most discussed angles in WWE. Whether the discussion is predominantly positive or negative will depend on execution, but the attention and engagement is almost guaranteed given the star power involved and the complicated history between these two men. CM Punk accepting Paul Heyman onto Team CM Punk is either the smartest or dumbest decision he's made since returning to WWE, and we won't know which for months until we see how this plays out. Drop your comments right now telling me if you think Punk is making a huge mistake or if you think he's playing four-dimensional chess and has a plan we don't see yet. Make sure you're subscribed because this partnership is absolutely going to create fireworks and you need to be here for every segment, every promo, every inevitable moment when it all falls apart. This is the kind of storyline that defines careers and creates legendary moments in wrestling history, and we're all along for the ride whether we like it or not.